Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at Ripple. Now Ripple has been all over the news recently because as of this week, it broke above its previous all-time high. Its new all-time high is about $3.70. It's currently trading at $3.50, which was the previous all-time high that we set back in 2018. This was kind of the last bull run Ripple had before it got sued by the SEC and kind of had this, I think it was 4 years long, 5 years maybe, of just uncertainty cast on the project because it created a very binary event. If XRP lost, the coin would be forgotten about, it wouldn't be touched because it can't be traded in America on exchanges or anything like this. A huge hit to the cryptocurrency. If it won, which, spoiler alert, it did back in 2023, it would obviously be the safest option for institutions or other American companies that want to either hold or use XRP in some way. Now, what's interesting is we didn't really get any kind of a really crazy move when XRP won the lawsuit. It was in 2023. I think it was March. And I remember on the day there was obviously very good price action, but it wasn't actually anything too crazy that I remember. And I remember actually pulling back quite a bit. So for me, I thought it was kind of a sign of the environment. Even great news like this was struggling to be long-term in the green. But it did slowly trade up. And then recently, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, XRP had a crazy rally that brought it up to these elevated prices of above $2. And I think this was to do with the Trump election and Trump getting into office, promising to basically buy these cryptocurrencies with federal money. That actually hasn't happened yet, but the price still rose drastically on the promise of it happening. And then again, recently it's rallied up and it's kind of put itself back in the spotlight as a big market cap cryptocurrency that hasn't been forgotten about. Because when we look at some of these cryptocurrencies, Litecoin, things like Monero, things like Dash, all these old OG cryptocurrencies that Ripple was, launched at a similar time, not too far away. Ripple is an OG. All these other coins kind of haven't moved. They haven't put in new all-time highs in, some of them close to decades. And Ripple was on that track. It didn't put in a new all-time high last cycle. I myself kind of wrote it off and went, look, even if it does win, it might not really get that much attention. But it obviously has, and I was wrong. And hey, I'm happy about that. Today, though, we're going to be kind of looking at previous price action, and we're going to be looking at what happened kind of after the halving for Ripple. So obviously the halving is also a very binary event in cryptocurrency, but it's usually positive in the long term, as we can see. And during this first cycle that we have data on, Ripple puts in its all-time high very quickly, very early into the cycle, and basically spends the rest of it going down. And we get kind of these lower highs. Usually we get some kind of mid-cycle pump, but it ultimately fades after the first high. And we've seen that more or less every cycle. Here we get this pump early on in the cycle, we rally up, we get a new all-time high, and then we fade for the rest of the cycle. We get our high for the cycle, and then we fade. And again, these last 3 years were the exception, because Ripple didn't actually really fade. It did have a big sell-off, but it kind of climbed slowly for the rest of the year. And again, like we've seen before, Ripple had this strong pump at the start of its cycle. What's interesting is that in this previous cycle, where Ripple was under siege, the rally that it got was very early. And this was also just in line with the general crypto space. But it was very early into the halving when we got this pump. And we just really got one move. The cycle before that, Ripple pumped multiple times. And we saw this again with kind of all the altcoins of this era. They all had kind of multi-stage pumps. Kind of 3 stages where the first one where they came to their previous all-time highs, they had some kind of a correction, moved up to this higher elevation, and then to what would be for most of them their all-time high, like Monero, like Litecoin, like Dash. And then the cycle before that, there wasn't this multi-stage pump, it was just the one and done, like we saw in 2021. What's interesting is that the time it takes for XRP to pump after each halving doesn't really vary too much. I mean, there's obviously kind of a, it's 38 weeks here, 29 weeks here. If we take it how many weeks it's taken us to pump this cycle, it's really kind of, it's almost the exact same as the cycle before it. So if you do simply want to look at, okay, we had our first kind of really strong green candle 29 weeks afterwards. How long did it take for us to put in our all-time high? Or that high for the cycle, it was 48 weeks. If we go 48 weeks on, I mean, we've missed it. But what's interesting is around the 38 week, we did put in a high, but we've obviously broken past that now. And to be honest with you, I don't think it would break above its all-time high here just to fade it. Now, it does happen in crypto. If it's going to happen anywhere, it'll be here, where we get a huge fake out where it just peaks above the previous all-time high and then does nothing. But the way the monetary climate's going, I would probably expect better price action in the future. How much could you expect, realistically? Well, again, Ripple is a huge cryptocurrency. It's 200 billion. And I would always be more conservative with these kind of thought experiments of where it can go, because I'd rather be right and make slightly less money than wrong and make no money. And so based on market cap, I would actually say that maybe you have a 2x left in Ripple now from its all-time high. You break just above $7. I definitely wouldn't be waiting that long anyway, especially if you've been holding Ripple for a while. If you've just bought in now, you're like, a 2x, that's nothing. It's still pretty good for a very high market cap altcoin. I do think, though, that coins that are currently have shown strength earlier in the cycle, back in mid-2024 or end of 2024, like Solana, I do think you're probably going to have better odds of making perhaps a multi-X move compared to something like Ripple, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. And that's just because they've already made big moves in the cycle. I mean, Ripple's market cap, it moved from 50 cents to $3 here. It basically moved from a market cap of 33 billion to 200 billion in the space of a couple of months. It already hit that 6x. And if it does move up, doubling its money from here, that's a 12x in total. You're just catching the 2x up here. So I'd almost argue you're too late to hit that crazy money move. But it doesn't mean money can't be made. And it doesn't mean that, again, it's not something you should or should not hold. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the likelihood of it doing another 6x, for me, is completely off the table. XRP will not break $1 trillion. If I'm this cycle, if I'm wrong, hey, sucks to be me, I guess. But realistically, I can't see that happening. It's already made a huge move. And I mean, if you look at this in comparison with other kind of, the years that XRP has moved, it's currently only up 50% this year. Now, obviously, that crazy move was over the end of last year in 2024, and we got that 230% move. In 2021, again, a bullrun year, we got that 250% move. What's interesting, though, is if you do look at a post-halving year for XRP, excluding kind of lawsuit times, it was the best bullrun XRP ever will have, I would say. 32,000% extraordinary numbers, you know what I mean? Made millionaires. I wouldn't expect another move like this, but if seasonality holds any weight, this is the year that potentially something would happen. And it just, it laughs at all these previous years. But if you exclude it, XRP is basically, let's include the average line here, it's below zero. The average for XRP over the last 7 years has been minus 25%. And I know there's all this kind of, it was in the lawsuit, I would argue that a lot of these other coins from a similar time performed similarly over this period. XRP is the exception here. Again, it's ultimately up to you. But in these last few years when XRP has done well, it's made about a 250% move. Maybe it does go on to make a 250% move this year. And if we go onto the chart and we basically find where we started, which was here, I'm going to need to shrink this, and we give it a 250% move from the open, just assuming we closed the year 250% higher, you're looking at an $8.50 XRP. And that's assuming that it pulls back, it at some point moves higher than that in the year and then comes lower. I personally don't see it. After we've already hit this crazy, multi-X, multi-bagger 6X here on a cryptocurrency that's 200 billion. XRP would have to be worth $1 trillion. Oh, well over $1 trillion for it to hit that evaluation. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But that's for you to decide. Let's now have a look at Bitcoin, XRP and Bitcoin. Again, a good indicator to see how XRP has done over time against Bitcoin. Now, at first glance at this chart, you think, this is okay. You know what I mean? It looks decent. It looks like an oscillator against Bitcoin. And you'd be right, it is an oscillator against Bitcoin. But I want to demonstrate something about how these charts can kind of hide information, if you will. I'll show you this afterwards. But if we take the all-time low for XRP, excluding this, weird candle wick here, and we say it's 450, I'm just going to say it's 500 to use easy numbers. Then we go to the all-time high, 500 sats, sorry. We go to the all-time high for XRP against Bitcoin. It's 24,666. I'm going to say it's 25,000, okay? Nice, easy numbers. So we have 500 to 25,000. If you want to get the midpoint, the middle price, the average, from low to high, we would divide the difference. So it would be 25,000 minus 500, that's 24,500. We split that in half. So that's 12,250. We're going to be easy on ourselves. We're just going to say 12,500. And we add that to the low, to the lowest point. So 500 sats, 12,500 brings us up to 13,000. 13,000 is all the way here. It's at these peaks here, this kind of resistance line. That is the middle line for XRP. Look at where we currently are. So again, this is the middle. Where my mouse is, this is where our current price is. We are almost a 4x away against Bitcoin from reaching the median, or the modal, sorry, whatever it is. I'm just saying we are well away from this, and if I turn off the logarithmic, you can just see how XRP is dwarfed by its previous price action. And again, a friendly reminder, you need to 8x from current price against Bitcoin's already brilliant performance this year to return to these all-time highs. If Bitcoin 2x's, XRP needs to do a 16x on its US dollar pair. A 16x on a $200 billion market cap gives you over $3 trillion. 3,200,000,000,000. 3.2 trillion. I personally don't think that will happen. It would overtake Bitcoin, first of all. It would overtake Ethereum. It would bring the total market cap of cryptocurrency well over 8 trillion. Assuming other altcoins don't rally with this, which if it were to happen, they would most definitely rally. So sometimes just looking at some of these basic numbers can be really important in helping you with your estimations. And again, back to this chart, it looks like XRP isn't that far away. It looks like halfway across, but it's not. So just be careful. Quickly as well, interestingly, XRP 34 weeks after the second cycle is when we get a rally. Or when we bottom out, sorry. That's where it should be measuring. That is where it's measuring. Sorry, my bad. So 34 weeks for us to bottom out first cycle, 33 weeks for us to bottom out second cycle. So far, assuming that this is the bottom, which it ever so slightly just is, it's been 29 weeks. So still similar, but slightly earlier. Again, if you want to compare it to previous price action, you might want to look at this second cycle here, where we had a very strong move up to begin with, which is what we've had, and then we double topped after spending some time trading downwards on a strong green candle. We spent some time trading downwards, and now we've almost double topped on the Bitcoin chart. We do see something similar in the previous cycle as well. Now, the pump isn't as extreme and the sell-off is far more extreme, but we do get a big move up, a big move down, and then a double top kind of situation. We get a similar thing in the cycle before that, where we get a early peak, where we hit a peak, get a correction, and then we return to kind of those highs. We get close to that price after a long downward trend. Now, the time differences between these things vary, but again, like looking at a few cryptocurrencies in the Cardano video, go check it out, it came out a couple of days ago, so still relevant price information. We saw that a lot of key events happen. It's just that their time durations vary. So if you zoom out, you can see, okay, it came down here, it rallied up, it did a double top, came down low, and then it had another rally. And it's very like telegraphed. Very easy to see the pattern. But when you zoomed in and measured the time differences, they kind of varied quite wildly. You could see something like this with XRP, where you do get kind of these milestone movements, these kind of events that do take place one after the other, but the time period between them varies, or the move that, percentage move varies, but you do kind of tick this box. I think potentially this could be something like that. Now you could also look at it and see that, in previous cycles, we usually get some kind of a move up, a consolidation, and then a move up. Again, I think it more leans on monetary policy. I think we are looking at more of a bubble phase, and I think it's specifically centered around all these technologies, AI, quantum. I think all these companies are extremely overvalued. And I think probably some of that money is making its way into cryptocurrencies. There are cryptocurrencies that are doing AI. There are cryptocurrencies that are claiming to do quantum. So for sure, there's trickle down. I personally don't know how long this will last, these kind of moves. I think we will probably have a couple more months of decent price action, but I do think it will be quick in moving up and moving down. And so I feel like this is the time where I would be watching carefully, whether you're holding XRP or not. Again, rate cuts could be coming soon. There's a lot of things that could influence what might happen in the crypto space. It's too much of an unknown, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't use TA alone. In fact, to be honest with you, I would lean more towards more fundamental value investing, things like EBITDA, cash flow. I know you can't really do a lot of these things with cryptocurrency, or they're not as prevalent, but a combination of both, I'd say, is ideal. All in all, XRP, very unlikely to ever return to these highs, in my opinion. I wouldn't even expect it to get close to this. Again, we are at the previous cycle Bitcoin evaluation. I don't think it's unreasonable for you to expect XRP to outperform the previous cycle against Bitcoin. By how much, though, that's definitely a much harder question to answer. Something that nobody can answer for you, realistically, until it's already happened. So look, either way, best of luck. Quick look at the seasonality of XRP on the Bitcoin pair. If we move it back to 2017, obviously a huge outlier in 2017. Let's bring it to 2018. We can see again, most of the time XRP finishes below. This year, we are currently just above a positive return. We're currently 20% positive on the Bitcoin XRP chart. The average is a minus 35% move down. Again, so if you were to short XRP at the beginning of the year, chances are if you held it long enough and you had a big enough margin, you would make 34% on average every year. Food for thought, food for thought. However, it is interesting that last time we did have a pump was 2021. Again, the 4-year cycle, this could be how it plays out. And again, if you do kind of look at the similarities, 2021 moved up much earlier, but kind of did nothing for the rest of the year. Perhaps we just get this kind of a move later on in the cycle and then move straight into our bear run afterwards. Who knows? I certainly do not. But whatever happens, I wish you the best of luck. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Comment down below why you didn't like the video. I'm always interested in how I can improve my videos. Maybe I forgot something. Maybe there's an interesting metric that's worth looking at. I don't know, and I won't know until you tell me, so please do. Thanks so much, guys. Take care, and peace.